Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and so far Season 1 of War Within has been fantastic when it comes to gearing your characters, between raids, dungeons, and delves, not to mention the plentiful amount of Warbound gear that keeps dropping for me. I feel like this might be one of the best times to gear out characters, though not everybody is having that good of a time, as a lot of players actually found themselves artificially capped at 619 item level for most of those pieces because of gilded crests and the lack of them and how to obtain them within Season 1 content, especially if you play the game more casually, like primarily in delves with some of the lower Mythic Plus dungeons. So a lot of players are stuck with hero track gear that they can't upgrade. But Blizzard is trying to make some adjustments in that regard to give players an easier time to be able to upgrade their hero track items, but also improving the pugging experience, specifically when it comes to Mythic Plus dungeons, and nerfing some of the more pain point instances such as Necrotic Wake by quite a bit. Today's video, I want to discuss all of these upcoming changes, some of which are actually live right now, but apparently even more updates are going to be arriving over the next week, and we'll probably see more stuff as the weekend goes on. As always, if you guys want to see more regular updates like these for the War Within expansion, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right into the newest updates. So first of all, let's go over the problem that a lot of players have been facing over the past few weeks so far in Season 1, with players essentially artificially stuck at 619 item level between champion track and hero track gear. Now, the biggest problem that players run into is lacking certain crafting resources, or rather upgrade resources, when it comes to gearing out their character. For example, if you have champion track items like these gloves over here, those items can be upgraded to maximum item level 619. Pretty easy to do. All you need is a couple of the normal crests, or I think it is crafted crests, as well as rune crests in order to upgrade that item all the way to 619. Fairly easy to do, fairly easy currencies to collect, and you can collect gear from normal delves or tier 8 delves and upgrade those items to 619. But if you were to get a hero track item, like from a Great Vault for instance, or from Mythic Plus dungeons, those items were also stuck at 619 item level, because both delve and dungeon players were lacking gilded harbinger crests, which you only would gain from +9 Mythic Plus difficulties and Mythic raids of Nerfs Palace, and no other option. So basically, whether you had hero track gear, which is supposedly better than champion track gear, both of these pieces, no matter which track, were stuck at 619 item level as the highest item level that most people could get into, and trying to squeeze your way into +9, especially as somebody who does delves, doesn't have a lot of Mythic Plus experience, is a lot more challenging, which created overall a pretty rough Mythic Plus dungeon and pugging experience, because players are just trying to get their 9s times so you can get the most amount of gilded crests, which means everybody's super selective regarding who they're going to be taking to their dungeons, which makes for a much worse pugging experience. And they're essentially trying to solve this issue a little bit with this time around by trying to help out those capped 619 item level players. What they did is lowered the difficulty needed of Mythic Plus dungeons in order to start collecting gilded harbinger crests from a +9 to a +8. And the differences between every single one of these dungeons is actually quite substantial. Like under the previous Mythic Plus system from Legion or BFA, where keys would cap out at +20 in terms of gear upgrades you can get from those dungeons, doing a +8 back then was fairly easy. But right now, with +10s being as difficult as the old +20s, every single item level or a plus level jump in Keystone difficulty is noticeable. So them dropping it to a +8 makes them a lot easier to achieve. This is a pretty big quality of life increase, which means more players can now collect the gilded harbinger crest to start upgrading the hero track items. And with a higher, better item level, you should be able to start having an easier time in some of the higher end keys and even higher end difficulty raid fights. So far, this has been met with a lot of positivity by the community. The fact that there's now a little bit more leeway regarding how you can get gilded harbinger crests, although I feel like they could potentially make the system a little bit better, because you are providing a way for Mythic Plus players to get more crests, but you still got the delvers that got a lot of hero track gear that also could use a couple of upgrades. And a lot of players have suggested that maybe they should start attaching gilded harbinger crests to some of the higher tier difficulty of delves, like tier 9, 10, or 11. I know those delve tier difficulties are technically just optional, but if Blizzard were to tie in gilded crests to those, then players would have an opportunity to have a bit better expression when it comes to their class skill and how well can they play them in some of the more difficult versions of delves, while being able to get the currency needed to upgrade all of their hero track gear. And would definitely help out a lot of the delve players that are interested in delve content specifically, but may not be interested in the time content like you would have like with Mythic Plus dungeons, but they don't necessarily want to die through the whole Mythic Plus system, especially if they don't have a score, and that would help out those players tremendously. My suggestion, however, and hopefully maybe though we'll see something like this in the future, is I really think you need to change up how the whole structure of upgrading your items works, and primarily in terms of which crest you should be using to upgrade your items. Personally, I think they should adjust it where you use the crafted Harbinger crest to upgrade champion track gear, and only carve Harbinger crest. Then you could save the Ruin Harbinger crest for hero track items, and then you can keep the gilded crest for the mythic track gear, because right now there's quite a bit of difference between hero track, champion track, and mythic track gear. And I think if you were to eliminate gilded crest entirely out of the equation, I think it would make the delve gearing and dungeon gearing even easier, but at least Blizzard is taking a nice step forward in trying to give players more opportunities to earn gilded Harbinger crest, but I think more still could be done in that regard. So now that you can farm up some of your gilded crest, they also wanted to make dungeons a little bit easier for players that are pugging through M+ content, through multiple different adjustments to make that content a little bit easier for random groups to get through. At first, they started with a focus on a couple of key dungeons that are pretty big group of busters, such as Necrotic Wake. A couple of parts of the fight has been adjusted. Like before Blightbone, you have a couple of encounters like the Zoroma's Gatekeeper's Wrath ability has been reduced by quite a bit, and the Skeletal Monstrosity's enemy force contribution has also been increased, so you should have to slay less enemies within Necrotic Wake in order to be able to get through that dungeon, which will reduce the amount of time you have to spend slaying multiple trash packs for Necrotic Wake just to hit the percentage required. The Kieran weapons in the dungeon no longer stack, which is a bit of unfortunate, but it does mean the groups need to have less coordination in order to maximize the Kieran weapon ability. At the same time, those Kieran weapons that were used to take down Surge and Stitchflesh, they're making this boss even easier. So them reducing the Stitchflesh's health by 20%, which means he's gonna die much quicker, and the creation the Stitchflesh summons, the Festering Rot AoE damage is being reduced by 30%. So less damage for your healer to deal with, less boss health to work with, and if the healer spends less time healing and can do more damage, that means the group output should be much better to take out this boss, which is a big group buster when it comes to most Pug M+ groups. Another dungeon they decided to go after specifically from this season's content is Stone Vault, specifically Skarmorak. Now, they did a handful of things to this boss, such as reducing his health by 10%, which is welcome. Skarmorak is now stunned for 4 seconds after his fortified shell is broken, and the crystalline eruption from the crystals that he summons has been reduced by 15%, which means that, again, groups need to have a little bit less coordination in order to be able to take down this fight, but also it becomes a lot less deadlier for a healer, which hopefully means there will be less group one-shots or group-wide one-shots for random pugs in some of the lower keystone difficulties. Voidspeaker Eirik is another boss from this dungeon that's also been kind of nerfed a little bit. His health been reduced by 10%, and they also increased the cooldown of his ability Entropic Reckoning by quite a bit. They didn't actually specify how much they increased it by, but I'll be interested to test all of the changes, which will actually be arriving very soon. Some of the changes they also implemented for this season's Mythic Plus is actually, I think those should be available right now or by the time you're watching this video. First of all, they're buffing up the affixes granted by Xal'atath. So all of Xal'atath's bargain abilities, whether it is the crit damage increase, mastery increase, or any other buffs, all of them are now going to last for 30 seconds instead of 20 seconds, which means pug groups should have a bit an easier time inside of dungeons with the buff lasting a little bit longer, which should hopefully help contribute towards your group's success. This overall is going to help ease up some of the difficulty for some of the lower keys like +9 and lower. But also they've adjusted for players that are trying to push some of the highest content, because this is where Xal'atath's bargain then transforms into Xal'atath's Guile. As players are getting to +12 difficulty keys when they're really trying to push, they get access to Fortified, buffing all the enemies that are not boss enemies inside of dungeons, but also Tyrannical to buzz boss enemies, and on top of it, your bargain now is getting taken away and transformed into Guile, which further increases the effectiveness of bosses and enemies in the dungeon by 20% regarding their damage and health. They're actually toning back down the Xal'atath's Guile a little bit, reducing it from a 20% increase down to a 10%. So players looking to push +12 difficulty content, especially if you're pugging your way through those as well, should also have a little bit of an easier time progressing through keys, especially as our characters are not fully geared up with full mythic set gear just yet, so they should have an easier time tackling some of the more difficult dungeons and have an easier experience in that front as well. So overall, they're softening up all of the more pain points when it comes to some of the keys for puck groups, but also they're buffing up the affixes to make some of those lower level keys, but also higher level keys just a little bit easier. And it just felt like the keys were just a little bit tough in some parts, and I think these changes are definitely going to help out a large amount of players and should help out the overall Mythic Plus experience. And apparently they said that more changes are coming very, very soon, so more announcements are arriving in the future, and I kind of wanted to throw in my 2 cents into the ring here as some of the different ideas they could do in order to help improve the gearing experience so far for Season 1 of The War Within. The first one would be, seriously, consider giving Delve players an opportunity to be able to earn Gilded Crest to upgrade their hero track items. A lot of players that are out there doing solo open world content, or rather solo Delve content, are more than happy to do some challenging stuff like the Zekvir encounter, for instance, even at some of the lower item levels. And many of those players have pride in being able to play their class super well and are fine doing challenging content, they just don't really enjoy group content. So giving them some kind of a way to be able to earn Gilded Crest, or just having an easier time upgrading the hero track gear, I think would be a very welcome change. While they are nerfing a lot of these boss encounters, I would love for them to take a look at a handful of more dungeons. I think places such as the Dawnbreaker, Misatyrna's Eye, and Arakara have become very easy +10 difficulty keys if you want to get one down for the weekly. Necrotic Wake was definitely a pain point, so they're taking care of that, as so was Stonevault. I really think they need to do another look at Group Batal. This is a very long dungeon, a very lengthy one, and I imagine like increasing the timer for that dungeon just by a bit may actually help quite a few groups. Siege of Baraz is another one that I think offers a lot of players still quite a bit of grief. Every time I pug it, this is like a 50-50, whether it's going to be a group that is going to be able to get all the mechanics down, or if there's going to be something like by Hadal or the final boss, if there's going to be something that is going to wipe people out immediately. Cedar Threads is another one that I think is really easy for the first 2 encounters, with Orator maybe being the more difficult one, but where I see a lot of groups fall apart is by Coaglamation or by Izzo. So I wonder if maybe they could take another round of looks over at City of Threads, not necessarily nerf it, but I wonder if more adjustments could be made to make some of those encounters specifically a little bit better. And I think it's more comes down to the ability boss timings for some of these guys, because there's a nasty overlap for Coaglamation between first healing mechanic for the 3rd boss, and Izzo does have a little bit of a tighter, I think, timing on the orbs. At least I noticed that a lot of pug groups seem to have a lot of hard time with that specifically. But hopefully we'll see more updates in the future, and I kind of want to pass it up to you guys in the comments below. What would you want to see specifically out of Mythic Plus and gearing system going forward? Regarding Delves, regarding M+ dungeons, would you want to see more boss nerfs? Would you want to see more dungeon nerfs? Would you want to see more ways for players to be able to get Gilded Crest? What type of avenues do you think should be able to provide players with Gilded Crest? Like weeklies, delves, with tier delve difficulty, all of those things. What would you want to see from the game to really make Season 1 really kick into high gear? Let me know all those thoughts in the comments down below. As always, I want to thank all of you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy this update or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like. I would very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community to keep up with all the regular updates happening for Season 1 of The War Within. Also, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll see all of you guys in the next one.